Hello everyone, it's Jim of Shiloh Kahal, and I'm in the mode to make some videos this morning, and so I wanted to go ahead and touch base on something that's been on my heart, but admittedly I have not fully developed, so this is not likely to be like a really well organized video. But I did, because I'm anxious to start talking about some things, and and really I'm putting the cart before the horse when I would really organize it all. But let me just share with you, since I'm in the mood to be talking to, about this subject matter. I have been a student of eschatology since I became a Christian back in the 80s. I was always interested, and now I started off in the realm of, late great planet Earth type stuff, but then also I got into I can't even think of his name, but I just was into eschatology, and it was the pre-wrath rapture picture. I'm sorry, not pre-wrath rapture. It was the pre-tribulation rapture concept that I was embracing for years, and was reading all of these stuff as Israel came together, because that was only 40 years. That was still the generation of Israel coming together, and all of what that seemed to mean at that time. So, I was just interested. I was a new Christian and I was interested, so I studied it. And then ultimately somebody introduced to me the pre-wrath rapture, which began to, just like I'm finding throughout all of scriptures, the church answers, often leave too many gaps that you have to just gloss over. And when I was in the pre-trib rapture picture, there were things that had to be explained away, because the reading of it is just too evidential. One will be left and one will be taken. Well, what does that mean? Yeah, there were just so many things that would go on and on. And in the pre-tribulation rapture concept, you have to begin explaining an awful lot of this away and who these people are. Okay, so I was introduced, and this must have been, I'm going to say, it was in the 90s. So I guess I would have been a pre-trib rapture person for at least around a decade. And then somebody introduced the pre-wrath rapture. Never heard of it. All I'd ever heard of when I was studying pre-tribulation was either you were pre-trib, mid-trib, or post-trib. And those were three options: either before the tribulation period that we understood to be the 7 years, right in the middle of that 7-year period, cut right in half, or after the 7-year period of time. Okay, never heard of any other options. I guess I had heard of amillennialism, premillennialism, post-millennialism, which is those were additional concepts, though. They were outside of what I was really studying at that point in time. I think I have a better grasp of what they might have been referring to then, but I've never really gone out and studied them because it's just too far behind the curve now. But I was introduced in the mid to late 90s, the pre-wrath rapture picture that still retained the 7-year period of time. And we entered the 7-year period that was then being identified as Daniel's 70th week. And somewhere after the midpoint of Daniel's 70th week would be, and by the way, all of that, all of the tribulation that was described, like the seals and some of the things that were going on first, these would have been the tribulation of Satan upon the earth, the tribulation at the hand of Satan instead of at the hand of Elohim or Yahudah. And then ultimately culminating against Israel and the church, that really at the midpoint, when he revealed himself, would really take on a new ferocity and would then, be the Antichrist going after the church. And then somewhere in the midst of that second half of the week would have been the breaking forth of the return of the Son of Elohim, Yahushua, Jesus, coming on the clouds to break forth and rescue everybody out of that great tribulation, that great time of tribulation. And then upon that rapture and upon that deliverance of the people dead and alive to be caught up, then Yahushua would come, and the retribution of Elohim, the promised retribution of Elohim against the godless, against the sinner, against the Gentile nations who reject him, was coming. And then you would have the wrath of God in that last period of time, in that seventh period. Well, I spent 20 years in that understanding, and was pretty adamant about it, and actually would get a little frustrated because, leaders in the church were not, they just couldn't embrace the idea that they were taking extra biblical thoughts and applying them, trying to rationalize a doctrine and a theory that really cannot exist without that in the scriptures. And so I was getting a little frustrated with church leadership and people. But I guess that plays true all over the place. That's just one topic, and it's not just the church people. It would be the Torah people. It would be all of us. I mean, we all have to be careful and fight against preconceptions. We need to be willing to lay down our doctrines, our positions, and our what we've come up with when we find scripture that suggests something else. In other words, scripture needs to really define our doctrine and not our doctrine define scripture. And that's what I try to do. It's what I want to do, although I find it hard, as everybody else does. Once you have the preconception, once you created that idea, it's what governs. It's the lens through which you see everything you're reading. Well, my objective, and I would say everybody's objective, ought to be to recognize that we've all placed lenses over our eyes. It seems like it would be a good thing to try to overcome that and read the scriptures for what Yahudah is trying to say to us and not what others have said to us and given us for understandings. We just have to really struggle to hear the scriptures for what they're telling us. Okay. So all of that to say, I've been living in the realm of, the pre-wrath rapture picture. And I was a pre-wrath rapture person well, I guess you would even maybe say until. But come 2020, everything changed for me. I watched things that horrified me in the election. And I realized how, first of all, I found alternative methods and places to go find information that I did not know existed. Maybe I just didn't have time or just was never pointed in the right direction. But as soon as I became aware that, wait a minute, there's more information, I wanted it. I went pursuing it. I pursued it, and I won it. Now, unfortunately, that sent me down a lot of rabbit holes. There's an awful lot of things that, once I got down there, I'm thinking, I just can't, there's just too many other inconsistencies, too many problems, and this is not the paradigm, it's not the doctrine, it's not the understanding I'm going to accept or receive. And I had to do that many times. Unfortunately, because I was so excited, it was all new, I probably spoke to more people than I should. There would be people that, in my sphere that I would share things with. And I suppose that with time, they would watch me go down a rabbit hole and not necessarily see that I came back up out of the rabbit hole. So they just think that I'm just chasing every wind of doctrine, everything that happens. Well, maybe, but I did. But I also tested it. Now, I'm not to say I successfully tested everything, but I have tested everything. There are so many rabbit holes I've come right back up out of that I'm just not going to. And I test it all. So at the end of the day, I'm not saying everybody else needs to trust what I'm doing, but who else am I going to trust other than, because I don't know of anybody else doing it in the manner that I'm doing it in with the intent. At least I can't affirm it in anybody else. Others are probably doing it. I just can't affirm it in anybody else, but I know it's there for me that I'm ready to undo everything I need to undo as I uncover truths. And I just want the truths. And so, okay. So in 2020, I became very aware of what it really means to have Satan be the God of this world and the controller of this world and the elites of this world. It sent me down historical paths. It sent me down the paths of LaRouche, Maderet, and all these other places. I mean, if you're familiar with Q and all those things that were happening in those times, I mean, I went and educated myself on all of it. And as many were doing, placing my hope in the idea that maybe some justice would come and maybe this Q would bring justice to an unjust, unfair, lying world that I was experiencing at the time that I expected the whole economy to go bad because, I mean, I don't know how you can really do what's been going on in our world. The laws of economics, it makes no sense. Something is holding up our economies. How are they? I've learned since that I laugh. I don't laugh. It's not funny. But the idea that our taxes are using our taxes to do this and our taxes, no, our taxes are gone in the first few minutes of every year. And what they're really using to fund everything is really more related to production of money, money out of nothing. And you can't even call it printing money anymore because they don't bother. It's just electronic transaction. And the people who are been tasked with that, bankers, people, private people who are, gleaning fractional interests off of the top and these are the elites of the world that have money and resources beyond anything we can fathom. And they've got a system that they create with a flip of a button. They create money. They put money in the terms of electronic things out into our economy through the fractional reserving system and allow banks to create. So basically, they'll push a button. They'll throw $100,000 out into the markets of money. And then the banking system turns that into millions of dollars. And we end up with millions of dollars having flooded our economy that even without dollars, you don't need paper money to do that. You have electronic money that has gone out into the marketplace, which should absolutely just devalue our dollar, our buying power. It should, but it's not. It hasn't been. So they're just creating money out of nothing and holding it up. Now, I'm not pretending to be an economic major. People who are in economics could pick apart everything I'm saying. I don't care. That's fine. But that's where I was at. I was expecting a crash and it didn't come. Now we are back. We've got Republicans back in power and in charge. And to those of us who, can embrace the Republican platform, and the Republican platform is our, in terms of its concepts are our champions. Well, yeah, but the Republican Party isn't really following that. I mean, it's just more of the same. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. So anyway, the point is, what I'm really trying to say though is, where all of that started me, though, led me off into the extra writings, and it led me off into the reality that, wait a minute, the church is Israel. Israel is the church, and I've got to go figure out what all of this means, and that's what I've been doing for 5 years now. And that's how I've been spending my time. And I've come to conclusions. I just did a video a few minutes earlier, with respect to Torah and how we are responding to Torah in our lives. But there are other issues going on for me, and that's what I'm doing in this video. Because, and I'll go ahead and get started on why I'm even doing this. One of the things that I've always understood is that for the Antichrist to come on the scene and surround Israel, surround Jerusalem, well, Jerusalem has to be practicing. And, Jerusalem has to be a thing. It has to be the people of Yahudah. There has to be some reason why the Antichrist would want to go there. And most of us in Christianity have always thought that we would see another temple built, the third temple, red heifers, and just all the things that go into building up something that the Antichrist then could step into and sacrifice, just become the abomination of desolation, having stepped into the place where he ought not be, which we all understand to be the temple of Elohim. So it needs to be there for our end time economy. Well, what's it been? A year or two back now, as I'm really pondering and thinking about this, and with some of the new things that I'd been hearing, I began thinking about it. That when I read Matthew 24, this period of time that he's talking about really does represent 80-70, which we didn't really know in the church, but we don't really hear much about it, or we hear, there are people talking about it, but the church doesn't really understand it much. But if you understand it now, in my economy, and I'm not going to try to explain everything here, but I will just say that, Yahushua was born, AD, or BC 4, 6, something like that, and began his ministry in AD 26, whatever, ended around 30, in that area. We don't know for sure when, but he was, 33-ish when all of these, when he was crucified. And then we had a period of time, 40 years, that the apostles went about evangelizing the entire world of the time, which would be Asia and Turkey and Asia Minor, Turkey, which is Turkey, if I understand right, and Greece and Italy, just the places that they went. And some of them went off into, which we don't, the stories are gone on us, but we can find that they went off to India and other places. They went in other directions and not just west and north. So 40 years, we saw this taking place. And during that 40 years, we had the split of the Yahudim. We had believing Yahudim that became the church. They became absorbed in what we called the church, that later became synonymous with a Greek Gentile church, not necessarily just Greek, but Gentile church, the non-Israel, non-Jew church that, the church teaches that, took over, became the new chosen, the elect of Elohim. But the reality of it is that there, wasn't just rejecting Yehudim at the time. When Yahushua came in and about, it was the Yehudim, it was the people of Yahuwah, the people of the southern kingdom, but it could also have been, those like, we had, was it Anna of the tribe of Gad or whatever? We have other, the tribes haven't moved back into the land, but people of the tribes have migrated back. So all of them that were of Israel, of the 12 tribes, were colloquially called Yehudim at the time. And for the believing Yehudim, who would have been the people of the tribes of Israel, well, they became known as the assembly, the kahal, the ecclesiastes, the church. To that church, the Gentiles were invited through Yahushua and through the promises of Scripture. The Gentiles were invited to join them, the believing Yehudim, the true spiritual Israel. The Gentiles were invited to join and become partakers in the covenant promises, the covenants of Israel. And that's what really took place when you really study out what Paul is writing. And really you just take it logically. You just see where Yahushua started and what became and where they all went to, what Peter did with his life after that, and what took place. So we really had the Yehudim as the believers that became known as the kahal, the ecclesiastes, the church. And then the unbelieving Yehudim, though, became those who were at odds and fighting what became known as the way. That's another way to talk of the Nazarene. All kinds of references to the people who believed in Yahushua and followed Yahushua, amongst them the Yehudim, the believing Yehudim, and the believing Gentiles. But the Jews became synonymous with Judaism, and the Jews became synonymous with the unbelieving remnants, the unbelieving portion of the Yehudim or Israel, which is rejecting the will and the way of Yah. So they set themselves up. That's the part of Israel, the part of the Jews, the part of Judaism that set itself up against Yahuwah and his ways, Elohim. And so that's what became synonymous. And so really by the time we in the church are being taught, who the church is, we lose the fact that the church really started out as the believing Yehudim. And so that is Israel. That is the spiritual Israel. And we as the church have just joined spiritual Israel. We've just joined them. That's all we've done. And so now we need to begin to really think about, okay, what does this mean to us? If we're not just Gentiles called to go in our own separate ways and not the ways of the Yehudim, then what was going on with the Yehudim? What are they called to believe? What are they called to? Are they called to follow Torah? Lots of questions in there. But it's clear, and the point of this, and I'll try not to belabor it further, the point of this is that Israel, unbelieving Israel, became synonymous with Jews, Judaism, things of that nature. And ultimately, it is unbelieving Israel that rebelled against Rome in, where did it start? I would have to go pull up my numbers to get exact dates. But there's roughly a 7-year period that people will talk about that culminated with a midpoint in like 66 with, is it Titus? I'd have to go really rebuild that thought. And I'm not really, that's not my point here. That's not what I'm trying to do. But what we do know is that in AD 70, Rome destroyed all of Jerusalem, including the temple, destroyed not one stone as Yahushua promised, not one stone left upon another. And we had a complete destruction of Jerusalem and Judea, but certainly Jerusalem, because that's what, the Romans created a, what do you call that when you encircle them and you can't get out? I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on what that's called. But that's really what happened to the people, and the people starved. They put up a valiant fight in the War of the Jews, the War of the Jews against Rome. They were valiant, but ultimately landed starvation. There was cannibalism taking place inside. There was so much going on, but that was to the unbelieving Jews. So this was what was pretty much left in Jerusalem, was mostly just the unbelieving remnants of Israel, which would be the rebellious remnants of Israel. And that's what was being judged. That's what was judged. And when Rome pierced the walls and came in and tore it all down and killed, I've heard so many things, up to 1 million people, but 600,000, 300,000, lots of people died during that period of time, and they were cast to the four winds. So the nation, the unbelieving nation of Israel, was cast to the four winds. Many went to the south. I've heard that before. Many of the unbelievers went to the south. Unbelieving Jews went to the south. Some went to the north, some went to the west. And some already existed out throughout the Roman kingdom. But the believing Yahudah, who would have been listening to the church, the Ecclesiastes, the Kahal, and the messaging to Yahushua, to his apostles, to his disciples, that when you see these signs coming upon, when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the in the place where it ought not stand, which you understood it to be the temple, then run. Do not come down from your house. Do not come in from the field. Don't go grab things. Go. Run to the mountains. Flee. Well, we've always... Okay, so just to finish that thought, the believers should have, those who are listening, would have vacated Jerusalem before Rome ever got there. So the persecution, the time of Jacob's trouble, if that AD 70 was it, would have been to the unbelieving Israelites at the time, because the believers would have left upon the instructions of Yahushua. Well, okay, so in the economies of eschatology, give me a second here. I need to go shut a door. Okay, forgive me. I'm sorry. So in the economies, though, of the thinking of the church today, really, all of the information we see in Matthew 24, we've drawn to our current time that would by necessity involve the Antichrist and the things of Daniel. Okay. But the but in that, and what has been introduced to me years, I've been hearing of preterism. And if you don't know what preterism is, and I think it's spelled Praetorism. Preterism means, effectively, in layman's terms, it means that the events that we have perceived in the church to be end-time events already occurred. That, the tribulation that Matthew was referring to in 24 already occurred. The events of Revelation already occurred, because they reference the short time language and the generations that don't pass language that we, in the church, we've explained those away. But it is troubling to see, there are some standing here, things that must shortly come to pass. And there are things that people, who are embracing preterism reference in that manner to try to pull the events of Revelation and Matthew and the sermon on, the Olivet Discourse into the time frame post Messiah, just, within that 40 years in that generation back then. Then you get into partial preterism, which means they would say there was some things happened then, but some things are reserved to the future. And in the context of, or not just the future, partial preterism was that, if I understand it correctly, some things happened right there in the first century. Other things happened throughout time. In the context of preterism, though, you begin to segregate futurists, those who believe that all the events are in the future, which is what most of the church would, especially if you're pre-trib, any of the tribulation pictures and positions that I would have been a part of, you would still be called a futurist, because what you are seeing in Revelation and Matthew 24 is still a future event to us. And then there are some who are calling themselves historists, which are saying that it really didn't happen then during the time there in that first century, 70 AD. But the events of Revelation have occurred throughout the time. And I guess, that's another event. So you have preterism, which they'll call full preterism. Everything happened in that first century. Then you got partial preterism, which is some things happened in that first century. Some things happened throughout history, or maybe some things are still, going to be in the future. And then you have historists that are saying basically throughout history we saw the fulfillment of Revelation. Well, I'm not anxious to just go chasing every wind of doctrine, but this is a rabbit hole I have to go down. So I've been investigating what they mean by that. I've been listening, I've been hearing, and almost always they are caught up in the concept that it's that language that says it's immediate. And then you have, and this is what caught my attention, because when I was evaluating this, it struck me that really, I was evaluating the Gog and Magog war. I've done some videos on the Gog and Magog war, which I now know occur at the end of the 1,000-year realm. It's clear in Revelation that Gog and Magog come back on. And then as I read the war scrolls, it sure seems to me that war is a description of that final, after they've been in the land for 1,000 years, period of time. And when you get into Ezekiel, it's clear that Israel had been regathered. And this is where I'm going to go here in this video, if I can get there. You go to Ezekiel and you'll see that they had been regathered. They had that period of time that we now know to be 1,000 years. And at the end of that period of time, when they were living in peace, at the end of that is when Gog and Magog, Gog of the land of Magog, comes on the scene and invades, which would be really the end of the events, the very last days of this age before the 8th day begins, which is something new that we do not really know much about at this point in time. But as I was evaluating Gog and Magog, and I started thinking it through, really when I pondered what really took place during the period of time in AD 70, at what better time would Yahushua have had an audience of people that he would be speaking to, that when you see the abomination of desolation standing where it doesn't belong, go, run, leave. And to whom would he have the largest message? Well, to the believers in the land of Judea, the land of Yahudah, and in Jerusalem. Lots of believers at that point in time. And his command would have been meaningful to them. What exists in Israel today, there might be some believers in there, and maybe I do not fully understand what is taking place in Israel today. I know that, they originate with, I don't even really want to go into, all of the discussions of, how the current state of Israel was formed through the Rothschilds and in the Balfour Declaration, and some of the ways that the state, and how the state of Israel is really not a believing state. And are there Christians in there? I think there must be. And would there be enough that it would reference those that Yahushua would be speaking to, so that when you see the abomination of desolation stand in where it doesn't belong, that we have believers there? Because we know that does take place in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is surrounded. And so would there be enough for them to leave? Now, I would also say that, as in years past, I conflated, as everybody else does, Gog and Magog with the Antichrist time, as though the Antichrist was Gog of Magog. I just don't think they can be legitimate now. But also, how then, if the Gog-Magog war is not the Antichrist war, then what is this Daniel 70th week? So the real point of this is I had to begin evaluating AD 70 and the destruction of Jerusalem as the potential time of Jacob's trouble, and the potential time that Yahushua was talking about, that great persecution. Because when you get in Matthew, it does say immediately after the tribulation of those days, you're going to see me coming on the cloud, and you're going to see along with my angels, and I'm sending them out to the four corners of the world, which the church understands to be the rapture. I understand to be the rapture too, but in the context of the resurrection of all of the remnant of Israel. So it will be that rapture. And it has to take place, or according to Matthew, it seems to take place immediately after the tribulation of those days. So that places that event right after the tribulation. Well, unless the church has been raptured already, then the tribulation of those days would not have occurred yet. So if the rapture is future, then the tribulation of those days seems to also be future. Now, I will also tell you, though, in the context of this whole discussion of preterism, they start saying that the 1,000-year millennium has already come and gone, that the rapture has already come and gone, that Yahushua has already come and gone. Jackson Snyder is somebody, I've appreciated his work to translate things and do some different things. But he's got some ideas that I struggle with, where he's accepted preterism. And they're talking about I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a moment, but he embraces that so much of this stuff must have happened back then. I mean, he's embraced the concepts of preterism, and if not full preterism, partial preterism. So the concept is, I know what I was thinking of is, he's done some work because he's got, he's read from Josephus, but there's also, is it a Sinai copy of Josephus? And it reads a little bit different, where when Josephus is describing who was supposed to be an eyewitness of these Jewish wars against Rome, when, in the synodic version of his writings, according to Jackson Snyder, if I understand and remember correctly, he was basically saying there were references to people having heard what appeared to be a voice from heaven, and the multitudes, as if Yahushua had come with a great shout and with a multitude, and people had heard it in the sky, which could be Yahushua having come back on the clouds with his angels to gather his elect from the four corners, and that could have taken place. I think that's what Jackson Snyder believes. That's how many people believe, and they think that the 1,000 years has come and gone, and they were in this little season described in Revelation 20. After that ends, it's post the 1,000-year millennia reign, and then we're in this little season where Satan has been released and goes about deceiving the world, and they think that that's what we're observing is his deception of the world in that little season. So I've been evaluating all of that, but while I want to keep an open mind, and I just really struggle because I do not think it can be. And that's the point of this video, is as I'm evaluating, and I'm not trying to take a hard stance, I'm just introducing, to the extent I can, push back on this concept that the 1,000-year reign has come and gone, and that we're in a little season. And that is because if the church is only going to focus on prophecies that they find in the new writings, and if they're only going to relate what happens against the prophecies of the new writings, then you can make that case, and many seem to have done it. But if you bring into the mix of prophecy the things that were promised to Israel, their destruction and their regathering, and that's what I'm going to visit here just a little bit. I've done videos on it, and if you were really interested, you could go find some other videos where I've spent a lot of time going into the various scriptures that deal with the judgment and scattering and regathering of Israel. That is key to our understanding the coming of Moshiach, the coming of Messiah. It's key to our understanding why he came, how he came, when he came. It's just key. And if you don't know this, if you don't compare your understandings and your prophecies and what you're pulling into the prophetic utterances, if you do not temper it with what you find in the old writings, then I think it leaves you going off in directions that I believe that the old writings will cause you to be more grounded in, and that's what I'm getting ready to share. So just in summary, while I am trying to find evidences that potentially AD 70 and that destruction might be the Great Tribulation that is referenced, because only in Matthew does it say immediately after the tribulation of those days. Because if I go to, I believe it's Luke and or Mark, neither of them have the term immediately. And then you get into the idea that there's a great tribulation and then after those days. Well, that doesn't say immediately, so that doesn't make you start playing it back, and you don't have to have it happen right away, because you could have what we experienced. If that event in AD 70 was the Great Tribulation that unbelieving Israel experienced, then we would have, by necessity, have almost 2,000 years of intervening time between that event and his coming back, unless the rapture has already occurred, which I don't think it has. I don't think it has. And one last thing before I go off to the scriptures that I want to go off to. As I ponder, and this doesn't make it right, but I'm just pondering, that if in AD 70, if the believers, the believing Yahudah, listened to Yahushua and fled, just fled, went out into the mountains, into the wilderness, and the various places they would have gone. And if they successfully fled, then who would have been left in Jerusalem and Judea primarily? And it would have been the unbelieving Jews that were to be judged. Everybody understands the unbelieving Jews were part of the judgment. That's why the nation is scattered. And this is what they'd been experiencing throughout their whole 1,000-year history. It's just they were unbelievers. They just did not believe him. They rebelled against him. And only the remnant ever really followed him. But what we know in Daniel and in other places is that when the Antichrist comes on the scene, which, by the way, it's not the intent of this video because I don't really know what to do with it. I've separated Gog and Magog. I believe that must take place after the 1,000-year reign. And that Gog and Magog war looks different, especially if the war scrolls represent that. It looks different, and it is different than what must still be the Antichrist scenario, the thing that takes place, the beast empire that comes onto the scene. I'm not sure any longer that it belongs in that 70th week, because maybe that 70th week was part of Israel's judgment at the time of Rome's destruction of Jerusalem, which would have been upon, see if I can keep this together for you, it would have been upon the unbelieving Israel that remained there after the believing Israel, which is the believing Yahudim, would have left. So the judgment at the hands of Rome, the judgment of Yahweh upon Israel at the hands of Rome that took place in AD 70 could very well have been that 70th week. Many are arguing for that. And it could be. It could be, because that is dealing with the people, the nation of Israel. And it's hard to keep straight the believing nation, which is spiritual nation, the spiritual Israel, and the nation of Israel, because the spiritual, the remnant are not being judged, except to the extent that their people are being judged. But the remnant are not being judged. That's spiritual Israel. These are the obedient, and they are protected. These are the Birakoth of Elohim, the blessed of Israel. It's always been the unbelieving nation that is going to be judged, and that the 70 weeks appear to be for that nation. But the point of bringing this up here is that it appears that at the time of Antichrist, when he comes on, which may have nothing to do with the 7-week period of time, now I'm trying to evaluate that, and has nothing to do with the Gog and Magog war. I think it's going to be maybe a special and separate thing that looks entirely different than what we've all envisioned it to be. But whatever that time seems to be, there clearly is a beast and his prophet that are out to get us and are given the ability to war against the saints, which is the chosen, the elect, us, for a season. So there is a time that not the unbelieving Israel, but the believing Israel is also going to be successfully persecuted and tribulated at the hands of an Antichrist that is riding a beast that appears to be comprised of 10 kingdoms, that 3 of them get uprooted and he becomes the... So clearly there seems to be a beast system, an antichrist system that comes on the scene before the coming day of Yahuwah, that precedes the day of Yahuwah and the 1,000-year period of time. And so the persecution of that time appears to be also against the church, the kahal, the ecclesia, the chosen, the elect, whatever you want to call them. Not just unbelieving Israel, because frankly, most of Israel is now scattered to the winds and throughout the world. What is left over there in the land of Israel is a remnant of the unbelieving Israel, a portion of it, but it can only be a portion of it because it can only be a portion of it. And there are all kinds of reasons for that, and that'd be a subject of another video of another day. So my point is, though, that, as they're trying to draw parallels into that end time 70th week, the Antichrist having come, being Nero and other potential players in there, and then the 1,000-year millennial period already happening, well, then that persecution that took place in Jerusalem would have also had to have been upon the believers. And if the believers paid attention, and you would hope they are believers and would have left Jerusalem knowing that it was happening, if they had listened, they would be gone. So it would have been unbelieving remnant, the unbelievers, the unbelieving Israel that was being judged in that period of time, which is also not congruent with our understanding of what Revelation and Daniel and some of these other things tell us about what the time involving the Antichrist would look like. So where I'm at right now is that I'm having to completely undo really my understanding. I don't know. I don't really, at this point in time, I'm not sure there's going to be a 7-year period of time before the coming of the great day of Yahweh. It may be way more immediate than what we realize, but I think we will see an Antichrist come on the scene that we as believers who are watching will, recognize as such, who comes here. Okay, that's beyond the scope of this video. What I am trying to do here, though, is say that I don't think it's possible. For a number of reasons, I don't think preterism is possible, full or partial. And the reason that I don't think it's possible is that the conditions, at least not to the extent that the 1,000-year reign could have occurred, because it is clear that there must be a time of the regathering of Israel that takes place. And the regathering takes place, that's the rapture, that takes place before the millennial period. And I'm going to show that to you in Ezekiel. That's the whole point here. And then during that, once they're regathered, they have a 1,000-year period of time. Well, in Ezekiel, it doesn't say 1,000 years, but it's an extended period of time where they're living in peace. We've come to know through Revelation that it's a 1,000-year period of time that they are living in the land. They've been regathered into the land, and they're living in peace before Gog and Magog attacks them. And so I want to show that to you, because never, unless they are hiding, and I'm not against, there are people who are saying they are hiding history, and I agree, they probably are hiding history. There are some people saying they've added years, they've created history. They've got, I'm watching videos where they're showing that it's not possible for some of these structures that exist across the world to have been built by men in the days, the 1800s. And I'm open to all of that, because it does seem incredible. It just seems incredible. But what I started to say is we've never seen, even if they're hiding history and we haven't seen it, and it's possible that the 1,000-year millennia did come and go, but if it came and went, and if scriptures are true, it would have had to look a certain way. And our history does not reveal anything like how it must look. So we've never seen anything like what Ezekiel promises us, like what Deuteronomy promises, what Jeremiah promises us. We haven't seen it. If it's hidden, then it's taken place in the same manner that Jeremiah and Ezekiel describe it that it must, and that we just never heard of the history. I guess all that's possible, but if I favor something, I favor that it's just not happened yet. It's still a future event. So my point here in this video, the rest of this video, is to just show you the passages that I'm referencing that say really we can't be in the 1,000-year reign. It hasn't already occurred unless something like history has been hidden, something great and fantastic like hiding thousands of years of history or changing it all took place. Because if history has any validity at all, even close, then we've never seen anything like it. Okay, with that, let me begin with some of the scriptures I want to share here. Okay, so this is not intended to be a full-on study. That's not what I'm trying to do. I just want to remind you of some things that I have shared in scriptures, and that is that when we get to the people of Israel that were called into the nation and they were brought in under Moshe, and then Moshe gives them in Deuteronomy 28 the blessings and then the curses, if you will. Here's the Torah. If you keep it, look at all these blessings that are going to follow you. And here's the Torah. And if you don't keep it, if you rebel against it, this is what's going to happen to you. And then in verse 29, towards the end of it, it starts talking about, it begins to be prophetic toward the nation of Israel and reveal the fact that the nation of Israel was going to rebel. It was just clear. And because it says in 29, and I'm not going to go read it, in 29 it says, it's going to be, there's going to come a day when your children's children are going to say, what has happened to this land? What occurred that has made this so, what has devastated this land? And then he goes on to say, well, it's because your fathers rebelled and just simply would not. And so they were judged, and then the land was destroyed, and then ultimately they were scattered. They were destroyed within the land, and then they were removed from the land, and they were sent to the four corners of the earth. This is taught over and over again. I'm just going to show you Deuteronomy 30 here as a reference point, but I've done other videos where you can read this throughout all of the prophets. All of the prophets, you will see the judgment, the scattering, and then the ultimate regathering as the hope of Israel. Their expectation, their promise is that, you're being punished, you're going to be spread, but the day of not being punished anymore ends. The day of punishment ends. And when it does, I'm bringing you all back right here. That is the essence over and over again. That's Jeremiah, that's Ezekiel, that's Isaiah, that's all of them. Hosea, everywhere you turn, you're going to find this theme. So I'm not going to rebuild that. I've done that in other passages and other places. But I am going to quickly show you 30, which I'm going to say is just really the beginning of it and really the theme point of it. And let me just share this as the background because I'm really headed to Ezekiel when everything is said and done. So let me just read Deuteronomy 30, Devarim 30. And it shall be when all these words come upon you, the barakah, which is the blessings, and the curse, which I have put before you, and you shall bring them back to your heart among all the Gentiles where Yahudah your Elohim drives you. So there is the scattering that he promised. And shall turn back to Yahudah your Elohim and obey his voice according to all that I command you today with all your heart and with all your being, you and your children. So there's a promised time coming when Israel is going to us. Israel. The Israel that he's going to gather together, we are going to have a turning towards Elohim. Because he's referencing it here. There's going to come a day, and then Yahudah your Elohim shall turn back your captivity. There is Isaiah 49, the scripture that Yahushua reads when he stands up, the release of the captives. Well, really, through all of these passages, Israel, when they are scattered amongst the people, they are considered and called captives amongst the Gentiles. So that's why he's saying Elohim shall turn back your captivity. So while they're scattered, they're in this captivity. And he's going to have compassion on those who are in captivity. So let me just read it. Then Yahudah your Elohim shall turn back your captivity and shall have compassion on you. And he shall turn back and gather you from all the peoples where your Elohim has scattered you. If any of you are driven out to the farthest parts under the Shemaim, from there Yahudah your Elohim gathers you, and from there he takes you. And Yahudah your Elohim shall bring you to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it, and he shall do good to you and increase you more than your fathers. And then I'll just read this very quickly. And Yahudah your Elohim shall circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed, to love Yahudah your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being, so that you might live. Now this would be a different topic, and I'm not really going in there, but I suggest that this circumcision of the heart is the resurrection. It is our new body that we receive and the new covenant that comes along at that point in time. But when we speak of Israel, here's talking about him being gathered from wherever they've been driven, from the four corners. There's your resurrection, there's your rapture, there's your bringing all the people back together, and they will be brought back to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. And I know that there are some who think that that's in the natural, that physical, natural people will migrate back into the land, and we will have natural Israel there. But I'm going to say to you, as I'm going to point out, and we're going to read in Ezekiel, it's not just the living, it's the dead. It's the dead that comes back, and that's what makes it so clearly the resurrection or the rapture. So let me just, before I move off to Ezekiel, let me just say that there has to be, if scriptures are going to be true, there has to be the time when they are judged and removed from the land, and that has happened. That happened in finality. It happened in 722 BC, it happened in 586 BC, and it happened in finality in 70 AD with Rome. But the promise that has not, by all appearances, happened yet is that he's going to turn back. When we turn back to him with all of our heart, with our hearts, and when we turn back to him, that he's going to gather us, turn back our captivity, have compassion, turn back and gather us from the people, and bring us to the land that our fathers possessed. So just to say it again, he will gather you from all the peoples where Elohim has scattered you, and gather you and bring you to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it, and he shall do good to you and increase you more than your fathers. So this is what in Deuteronomy must happen to Israel before the end of time. And I'm going to say that what he's describing here, when they are brought back into the land, this is the millennial period that we've come to know in the new writings, because of the promises of what that land looks like, and what, that is the reign of Elohim, that the king of that land is Yahushua, the Messiah. Okay. All right, now let me head off to Ezekiel here. Okay, so I just previewed Ezekiel. It turns out to be verses 34 through 39. So I find no real way to keep this terribly short. So I'm just going to have to sacrifice that, and hopefully you can stay with me. I may do a separate video just trying to focus on Ezekiel, but it's just going to be hard to do it in a short video for many people. So let me just go to Ezekiel 34, which is the passage. These are the passages that I think eliminate the concept that the 1,000-year reign could have happened yet, because these are the passages that are going to describe what this reign must look like if our scriptures are going to be real. So let me just start with Ezekiel 34. And forgive me, I'm going to try to read. It's going to make me want to read fast to get through so much, but I'm going to try to keep it slow, which may elongate it, but I want to make it so that people can read. So I'm going to more or less read most of chapters 34 through 39 with emphasis on certain areas of it. So forgive me. So 34 begins, and the word of Yahudah came to me, saying, Son of man, Nabah, or prophesy, against the shepherds of Israel, Nabah, and say to them, Thus says the Adon Yahudah to the shepherds, Woe to the shepherds of Israel who have been feeding themselves. Should not the shepherds feed the flock? You eat the fat, and you put on the wool. You slaughter the fatlings. You do not feed the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, nor have you healed the sick, nor bound up the broken, nor brought back the straying, nor sought what was lost. But you have ruled them with might and harshness. And they were scattered, because there was no shepherd, and they became food for all the beasts of the field when they were scattered. My sheep wandered through all the mountains and on every high hill, and my sheep were scattered over all the face of the earth, and no one was seeking or searching for them. So this is just the condition that he's referring to here. And at the time of Ezekiel and the time of this prophecy, they were just being conquered by Babylon and being scattered and taken off, mostly off to Babylon. But, basically he's saying his people are not, they're leaderless, and the people who were leaders were taking advantage of them, and so his sheep are going to be scattered over the whole face of the earth. Verse 7. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of Yahuwah. As I live, declares the Adon Yahuwah, because my flock became a prey, and my flock became food for every beast of the field from not having a shepherd, and my shepherds did not search for my flock, but the shepherds fed themselves and did not feed my flock. Therefore, O shepherds, hear the word of Yahuwah. Thus said the Adon Yahuwah, see, I am against the shepherds, and shall require my flock at their hand. And I shall make them cease feeding the sheep, and the shepherds shall feed themselves no more. And I shall deliver my flock from their mouths, and they shall no longer be food for them. For thus says the Adon Yahuwah, see, I myself shall search for my sheep and seek them out. I'm suggesting that is a messianic prophecy. This is what Yahushua came. I came to seek the lost and the sheep that had been lost. And I myself is Elohim. This is probably Yahushua, speaking in the agency of the Father there, the agency of Yahuwah. Anyway, as a shepherd seeks out his flock on the day he is among his scattered sheep, so, let me start again in verse 12. As a shepherd seeks out his flock on the day he is among his scattered sheep, so I shall seek out my sheep and deliver them from all the places where they were scattered in a day of cloud, dense cloud. And I shall bring them out from the peoples and gather them from the lands and shall bring them to their own land. And I shall feed them on the mountains of Israel, in the valleys, and in all the dwellings of the land. So here it is, reading from Deuteronomy 30. This is the regathering. Wherever they were sent under the four corners of the Shemaim, he will bring them at that time. He will bring them out from the peoples and gather them from the lands and bring them to their own land, which is Israel, in the area of the land, which will be the New Jerusalem. That's where the New Jerusalem is going to be set up. Okay. So here we are. We know that this is still that event spoken of in Deuteronomy 30 where we are gathering Israel into the land. And so we need to see this event happen or we have problems with scriptures and prophecy. Verse 14. In good pasture I shall feed them, and their fold shall be on the high mountains of Israel. They shall lie there in a good fold and feed in rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. Let me just take a moment to say, when we're talking about the high mountains of Israel, this would be Mount Zion. By all appearances, at the time in the latter days when Yahushua comes and devastates the whole region, which is going to then be in preparation for the New Jerusalem coming down. This is what I think makes sense to me. Well, when it comes down, the New Jerusalem will be full of high mountains. It will have wonderful mountains, wonderful valleys, wonderful everything. It's going to be the best of all places. And so in 14, that's what he's describing. This is the New Jerusalem, in my opinion, and good pasture. In good pasture, because that's what the New Jerusalem will be. So in good pasture I shall feed them, and their fold shall be on the high mountains of Israel. I think these are going to be higher mountains than what we see in Israel these days. And they shall lie there in good fold and feed in rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I think this is a reference to the New Jerusalem, Mount Zion that comes. Verse 15, and I shall feed my flock and make them lie down, declares the Adon Yahuwah. I shall seek out the lost and bring back the strayed. There you go. Yahushua, our Messiah, came to seek and find the lost sheep of Israel, those who had strayed. And I shall bind up the broken and strengthen what was sick, but the fat and the strong I shall destroy. I shall feed them with right ruling. So the new shepherd, the Adon Yahuwah, when he brings them back out, he's going to bind them up and strengthen what was sick. And then he's going to destroy those who took advantage. And he's going to feed them with right ruling, which are right judgments, right understanding. He's going to teach them how he thinks so that they can think like he thinks. And so he will continually feed them with that right understanding of how he thinks. One other thing I'm going to mention, and this would be one of the things I'm still trying to work out, is it seemed like when Israel was going to be gathered from the four corners, it was going to be a spiritual gathering. And so why would we be binding and strengthening the sick, etc.? Because what sick would there be if everybody's raptured? But it also seems pretty clear that it isn't just going to be the dead that are raised and the spiritual Israel that is changed in the blink of an eye, as Paul teaches us. Not just those who are resurrected and raptured in that moment, who will occupy the mountains of Israel, the New Jerusalem, in our new spiritual bodies with our new spiritual abilities, but alongside of natural men that weren't raptured, men that were not found worthy of that first resurrection, but are still going to be brought into the land and will be alongside of us and alongside of our sovereign, the King, Yahushua. They will be serving. We will have the spiritual and the natural living alongside of each other in that day in the New Jerusalem. That's what I think. That's how I postulate from what I'm seeing here, because I do see what appears to be natural men who have natural frailties that must live alongside of what we're going to see, which are going to be the spiritual men who will not have those natural frailties. Okay, verse 17. And as for you, O my flock, thus said the Adon Yahuwah, see, I am judging between sheep and sheep, between rams and goats. Is it not enough for you to have eaten up the good pasture, and the rest of your pasture you trample with your feet? Or that you should drink of the clear waters, and the rest you muddy with your feet? As for my flock, they eat what you have trampled with your feet, and they drink what you have muddied with your feet. Therefore thus said the Adon Yahuwah to them, see, I myself shall judge between fat and lean sheep. So he's going to strengthen those who were lean, but for the fat and the strong, he's going to destroy them. And so here he's telling you what that means. He is going to judge between the fat and lean sheep. Because you have pushed with flank and shoulder and thrust at all the weak ones with your horns and scattered them abroad, therefore I shall save my flock. I shall save my flock, and let them no longer be a prey. And I shall judge between sheep and sheep. And I shall raise up over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he shall feed them. He shall feed them and be their shepherd. And we know this is messianic. So my servant David is Yahushua, the Messiah of the line of David. And I, Yahuwah, shall be their Elohim, and my servant David a prince in their midst. I, Yahuwah, have spoken. And I shall make a covenant of peace with them, and make evil beasts cease from the land, and they shall dwell safely in the wilderness, and sleep in the forest. This is a reference to, and it's not really where I want to go from here, but this is another reference to that new covenant that we do experience because of the blood of Yahushua, because of the blood of Jesus. We do experience the new covenant, but that new covenant that we experience, that Yahushua bought for us in his blood, it comes at the time when we are gathered into the land, and the resurrected are resurrected, or the elect are resurrected, and the natural people come back into the land, and they will also experience Barakah, just being in proximity to all that blessing. In verse 26, and I shall make them and the places all around my hill a Barakah, which is a blessing, and shall cause showers to come down in their season. Showers of Barakah they are. Showers of blessing. And the trees of the field shall yield their fruit, and the earth yield her increase, and they shall be safe in their land. See, this is the experience that everybody's going to be experiencing. This is the New Jerusalem. All of the places all around are going to be Barakah. Showers are going to come in their season. The trees are going to yield their fruit. The earth's going to yield its increase. Everybody's going to be safe during that period of time, that 1,000 years, that they have been gathered back into the land. And they shall know that I am Yahuwah when I have broken the bars of their yoke, which is the captivity that is broken when they are brought back into their land. And I shall deliver them from the hand of those who enslaved them. See, there's the captivity. And they shall no longer be a prey for the Gentiles, and the beasts of the earth shall not devour them, and they shall dwell safely with no one to make them afraid. That is the condition of the resurrected people, Israel, brought back into the land. They will dwell in safety for that 1,000 years with no one to make them afraid. Verse 29. And I shall raise up for them a planting place of name, and they shall no longer be consumed by hunger in the land, nor bear the shame of the Gentiles any more. And they shall know that I, Yahudah their Elohim, am with them, and that they, the house of Israel, are my people, declares the Adon Yahuah. That's big. And they shall know that I, Yahudah their Elohim, am with them, and that they, the house of Israel, are my people. Just speaking again to the things I've been sharing in this, in the video I made just a little bit ago, where we are the house of Israel, the church. The Gentiles who have joined the house of Israel, we have joined with them, so that we have become the people of Elohim, the house of Israel, my people. So let me just read that again. And they shall know that I, Yahudah their Elohim, am with them, and that they, the house of Israel, and the Gentiles who have joined among them, are my people, declares the Adon Yahuah. And you, my flock, the flock of my pasture, are men, and I am your Elohim, declares the Adon Yahuah. That's also big. I didn't highlight it, but you, my flock, the flock of my pasture, are men, and I am your Elohim, declares the Adon Yahuah. Okay, verse 35 I'm going to skip, because this is judgment against Mount Seir, one of the Moabites, the Ammonites, and those who rose up against Israel and really took advantage of Israel would be amongst the sheep that are going to be destroyed. And that's what this is all about, but that's not the point of what I'm doing here in this video. So I'm just going to go scroll through 35 because it's all about the judgment of Mount Seir. There is some stuff in there speaking of the rewards of Israel and the situation of Israel, but I don't need chapter 35 since there's so much in 34, 36, 37, 38, and 39. Okay, so let's go on to 36. And you, son of man, Nabah, are prophesied to the mountains of Israel, and you shall say, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yahuah. I highlighted that just because this is the son of man prophesying to the mountains of Israel, saying, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yahuah. And then this is what he has to say. Thus said the Adon Yahuah, because the enemy has said of you, Aha, the heights of old have become our possession. Therefore, Nabah, and you shall say, Thus says the Adon Yahuah, because they laid you waste and swallowed you up on every side, land of Israel, so that you became the possession of the rest of the Gentiles, land of Israel, and you are taken up by the lips of the talkers and slandered by the people. Therefore, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Adon Yahuah. Thus says the Adon Yahuah to the mountains, and to the hills, and to the rivers, and to the valleys, and to the deserted ruins, and to the cities that have been forsaken, which became a prey and a mocking to the rest of the Gentiles all around. Therefore thus says the Adon Yahuah, have I not spoken in my burning jealousy against the rest of the Gentiles, and against all Edom, who gave my land to themselves as a possession, with all joy of heart, with scorn in their being, to drive it out for prey? Therefore, Nabah, or prophesy concerning the land of Israel, and you shall say to the mountains and to the hills, and to the rivers and to the valleys, Thus said the Adon Yahuah, See, I have spoken in my jealousy and my wrath, because you have borne the shame of the Gentiles. Therefore, thus said the Adon Yahuah, I have lifted my hand in an oath that the Gentiles that are all around you shall bear their own shame. But you, O mountains of Israel, put forth your branches and bear your fruit to my people Israel, for they are about to come. That's huge. You, O mountains of Israel, this area of Israel, the place that had been occupied by the fathers, and are going to now be occupied by the children's children, the remnant of Israel. But you, O mountains of Israel, put forth your branches and bear your fruit to my people Israel, and that Gentiles who have grafted in amongst them, for they are about to come. Have they ever come? Is this the regathering in 1948? I don't think so, because there's so much more description that has never taken place in 1948. But clearly, and this is the prophecy of Deuteronomy 30, that the people are going to be regathered back onto the mountains of Israel, to the land of Israel, the people Yisrael, his people Yisrael, the spiritual people of Israel, those who have joined unto the covenants and the promises of Israel. They are about to come, and there is your resurrection, there is your rapture, and I do think natural men will be coming into that land also. But certainly the people of Israel, the spiritual seed, will be raptured and brought back in, and you're going to see more as we keep going through what that means. For look, verse 9, for look, I am for you, and I shall turn to you, and you shall be tilled and sown. Now we're still talking about the mountains of Israel, where Yahudah is saying, I shall turn to you, mountains, and you shall be tilled and sown, and I shall increase men upon you, mountains of Israel, all the house of Israel. So mountains of Israel, I'm going to increase the men, all of the house of Israel upon you. And the cities shall be inhabited and the ruins rebuilt. So the cities that had been destroyed will be rebuilt and inhabited by the people of Israel that he is about to bring back, and he shall increase the people upon them. And this is that 1,000-year period of time that is happening. The increase that takes place, that ultimately Gog and Magog comes to what would you call it when they come to try to steal things away? Okay, verse 11. And I shall increase upon you man and beast, and they shall increase and bear young. So this isn't this isn't spiritual Israel. We're not going to be given in marriage, and I don't think we're going to be having children anymore. Not in our spiritual sense. We're not going to be given in marriage, but natural men continue to be, as they are upon the mountains of Israel. That's why I'm confident that we're going to have the spiritual and the natural living alongside, and there will be natural Israel, men of flesh, today's kind of flesh, that will be living and bearing and young, and so will the animals and the beasts still be living and bearing young during that time, living alongside of the spiritual Israel. And I shall make you inhabited as of old, and do better for you than at your beginnings. So the second time around is going to be better than the first time around. And you shall know that I am Yahudah, and I shall let men, my people Yisrael, including the Gentiles who have joined unto Israel, walk upon you, and let them possess you, and you shall be their inheritance. There are the promises of Israel. You shall be gathered back into the land, and the land shall be given to you. These are my people Israel. And this will be the spiritual. This is that I will let my people Yisrael walk upon you and let them possess you, and you shall be their inheritance. At this point in time, we who are the resurrected people of Israel, we've already inherited it. It's ours. Now the natural people that are still in the flesh are still going to have to die. Is it their inheritance? Maybe, I suppose, if they become saved like the rest of us, if they give their ways to Yahudah, it would ultimately be their inheritance too. But certainly during this 1,000-year period, it's already our inheritance, my people of Israel, and the Gentiles joined unto them. And no longer let you, the mountains, add to the bereavement of my people Israel. Thus, verse 13, thus said the Adon Yahudah, because they say to you, you devour men and have bereaved your nation, therefore you shall no longer devour men, and no longer bereave your nation, the people of Israel, declares the Adon Yahudah, as it did when natural Israel during the 1,000 years was bereaved and devoured and destroyed by the land because of their disobedience and the rebellion. Okay, verse 15. And no longer shall I let you hear the insults of the Gentiles, and the reproach of the peoples you shall bear no more, and no longer cause your nations to stumble, declares the Adon Yahudah. And the word of Yahudah came to me, saying, Son of man, when the house of Israel dwelt in their own land, they defiled it by their own ways and their deeds. There you go. That's the history of the 1,000 years I just discussed. The house of Israel, when they were dwelling in the land that had been given to them initially coming out of Mitzrayim or Egypt, they defiled it by going their own ways, doing their own deeds, which is the warning sign, if you listen to my video earlier this morning, that's just not the way to be. We don't want to go our own ways. I know that the church has taught us certain ways to that we are that they've taught us would be representative of the ways we please Yahuwah. But Yahuwah already gave us the ways, and we need to be going and studying what the Torah is telling us about his ways and how he wants us to be. And that would trump and preempt what the church is telling us. We need to be figuring out what it means to walk in the ways of Yahuwah that pleases him, to do his ways and his deeds and not our own ways and own deeds, as I'm highlighting here. Okay, to me, their way was like the uncleanness of a woman in her monthly period. And I'm going to say that that's what the church is doing to us who want to follow Yahuwah. They're giving us leadership that is causing us to do things. I think it's very possible and probable that when we're eating unclean foods, we are causing him to be really just, he calls it an abomination. It's uncleanness. There's just so much about the way we might be living, and certainly not obeying the Sabbath, remembering the Sabbath and the Sabbath gathering information that we're supposed to. Okay, so all of this is just, our ways are not his ways, and when we do it our way, it's like the uncleanness of a woman in her monthly period. And if we really want to choose him and do it his way, then we need to figure out how we are not going to be that to him. Verse 18, so I poured out my wrath on them for the blood they had shed on the land and for the idols they defiled it. Now we're talking about the house of Israel in that 1,000 years that they occupied the land in rebellion and defilement, except for the remnant spiritual Israel. And so, in verse 19, and so I scattered them amongst the Gentiles, and they were dispersed throughout the lands, just like Deuteronomy 30 said they would be. When they went their own ways, the land was going to be destroyed, just like we read in Deuteronomy 29. And then they were going to be scattered amongst the Gentiles, where they would be considered captives during the period of time that his people Israel is amongst the Gentiles, and that is the time period we're in. The Gentiles, the house of Israel has already been dispersed. And the house of Israel, as Ezekiel is talking about here, I think is a better explanation of what that house of Israel would have been that got judged in AD 70. Not necessarily spiritual Israel that would have gone off into the mountains at the instructions of Yahushua, but the house of Israel that was the last part that is being here in verse 18. So I poured out my wrath on them for the blood they had shed on the land and for their idols and how they defiled it. And then he scattered them amongst the Gentiles, and they were dispersed throughout the lands. And in AD 70, the house of Israel was, along with the remnant of Israel, spiritual Israel, we all got scattered. And here's the house of Israel in verse 19. I have judged them according to their ways and deeds. AD 70. That was the final thing. The nation of Israel has been judged according to their ways and deeds as promised in Deuteronomy 30. And then as a result of that, when they came to, verse 20, and when they came to the Gentiles, wherever they went, they profaned my Kodesh name. For it was said of them, these are the people of Yahuwah, and yet they have gone out of his land. But I had compassion on my Kodesh name, which the house of Israel had profaned among the Gentiles wherever they went. So there's the house of Israel doing that. In verse 22, therefore say to the house of Israel, thus says the Adon Yahuwah, I do not do this for your sake, O house of Israel, but for my Kodesh name's sake, which you have profaned among the Gentiles wherever you went. I wonder now in this moment if that is not really what we see in Judaism, which are profaning the name of Yahuwah. To this day would be the house of Israel, even though they're calling themselves Jews. They are the house of Israel, the house of Yahudah, the Yehudim, the Jews, the Jewish. Is this the people who are profaning his name wherever they go? But even the remnant, faithful remnant, may be doing that as well. I don't really know. Verse 23, and I shall Kodesh my great name, which has been profaned among the Gentiles, which is separate. I shall make holy my great name, which has been profaned among the Gentiles, which you have profaned in their midst, O house of Israel. And the Gentiles shall know that I am Yahuwah, declares the Adon Yahuwah, when I am Kodesh in you before their eyes. So he is going to separate himself and become holy. We are going to see a return of Israel being great and causing him to be extolled, to be glorified, for lack of a better, I shouldn't probably use that, but extolled, esteemed in their midst, in their eyes. When it takes place, when he does what he does to the nation of the house of Israel. Verse 24, and I shall take you from among the Gentiles, and I shall gather you out of all lands, and I shall bring you into your own land. Now I'm wondering in this breath, because I know that this is something going on inside of me right in this moment as I'm reading this, something Terry and I have been trying to figure out. Because we have the resurrection of the believing remnant that is, the ecclesia, the chosen, the elect, and they are resurrected and brought into the land. But I'm also speaking of the house of Israel that profaned his name. I wonder if this is, because I have been seeing something, and this might be the types of things that I'm looking for. Evidence that not only are we going to get the spiritual gathering of spiritual Israel in the resurrection or the rapture back into the land, but this would be the house of Israel who was not resurrected. They were not deemed worthy of the resurrection, but they also are being gathered from amongst the Gentiles and gathered back into the lands. And that might be more of the literal line of the Hebrews, not including the Gentiles in that period of time. Maybe. I'm just postulating in my head, and I'm sorry I'm taking you along with me. But we do know that he's saying he's going to take them, the house of Israel, from among the Gentiles and gather them out of all the lands and shall bring them back into their own land, which are the mountains of Israel, the New Jerusalem. Verse 25. And I shall sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean from all your filthiness and from all your idols. I cleanse you. And I shall give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. And I shall take the heart of stone out of your flesh, and I shall give you a heart of flesh, and put my ruah within you. And I shall cause you to walk in my laws and guard my right rulings, and shall do them. Now maybe what I just shared with you maybe would not be correct also, because I have often taken this is 36:25, and I've taken this passage, and I think it's probably still true. When he says, I shall sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean from all your filthiness and from all your idols, I cleanse you, and shall give you, in verse 26, a new heart and put a new spirit within you, and I shall take a heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh, and put my ruah within you, and I shall cause you to walk in my laws and guard my right rulings, and shall do them. I've often received that as the resurrection body, because when the flesh is taken away, the natural body is taken away, and it is replaced with the spiritual body that we are going to receive, our new body, we are going to be, as it is taught in First Enoch and other places, we are going to be, well, even here where it's saying, we are going to be enabled to walk in his Torah and his laws and in his right rulings. We're literally going to be able to do in those days in that body, to do his will perfectly. Not with all of the constraints that our flesh brings to us now, the weaknesses that this flesh brings to us in the form of sin now. Okay. Verse 28, and you shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I shall be your Elohim. So in the context of this video, and I'm sorry I've gone on some rabbit trails, but this is back into the context of what I'm making this video for, is because ultimately all of Israel has to be gathered back into the land that I gave to your fathers. And I don't think the regathering in 1940 of Israel will qualify. And you shall be my people, and I shall be your Elohim. So at the time that he does it, it's going to be pretty evident that he's going to be the Elohim of the people, and not in a profaned way. And he shall be the Elohim of his people, Israel. Verse 29, and I shall save you from all your uncleanness, and I shall call for the grain and increase it, and I shall bring no scarcity of food upon you. And I shall increase the fruit of your trees and the increase of your fields, so that you need never again bear the reproach of scarcity of food among the Gentiles. And you shall remember your evil ways and your deeds that were not good, and you shall loathe yourselves in your own eyes for your wickedness and for your abominations. So this is just more of what we're going to see in the land of Israel in the day that they are regathered and the New Jerusalem comes down. Verse 32, not for your sake am I acting, declares the Adon Yahudah. Let it be known to you. Be ashamed and blush for your ways, O house of Israel. Thus says the Adon Yahudah. On the day that I cleanse you from all your wickedness, I shall cause the cities to be inhabited and the ruined places to be rebuilt again. And the land that was laid waste, tilled, instead of being a ruin before the eyes of all who pass by. just like it was described in Deuteronomy 29. And they shall say, this land that was laid waste has become like the Garden of Eden. The promise. The promise first that it would be laid waste, which we saw. The promise of Deuteronomy 29, we saw it happen over the course of that 1,000 years. But when they are all gathered back together, it's going to be fixed up and become like the Garden of Eden. We need it to become like that. I suppose there would be some people who say, yeah, but look at Israel now. Look how they've proliferated and how they've grown their cities. And I guess they're doing well in the confines of the world's systems. They're doing well, but it's not like the Garden of Eden, as is promised to us. And the wasted, the deserted, and the destroyed cities are now walled and inhabited. Then the Gentiles, now I'm going to note here that they are walled and inhabited. So, because we're going to have unwalled villages in a little bit, and I'm thinking that, there might be a distinguishment between cities that are walled, because we do see in Ezekiel 40 that there's a wall, that Jerusalem is walled, that there's walls. But then we're going to have the unwalled villages referenced in just a few chapters when we have Gog and Magog coming into the land of unwalled villages, which would be the New Jerusalem and the outlying area, because not everything is city. You're going to have wilderness. You're going to have towns out in the land, just like they did. You had Jerusalem, then you had the towns there and about, and you will have towns and villages out and about, and not all of those are going to be walled. In fact, probably most of them are not going to be walled. Only the larger cities are going to be walled, probably. I'm just trying to piece together what I'm reading here. Verse 36, then the Gentiles which are left all around you shall know that I, Yahuwah, have rebuilt the destroyed places and planted what was laid waste. I have spoken it, and I shall do it. This is the regathering. This is redundant, but I don't think we can call what's happened since 1948 representative of what we see described to us in these passages. Verse 37, Thus said the Adon Yahuwah, once again I shall let the house of Israel inquire of me, to do for them. I shall increase their men like a flock, as a Kodesh flock are separate, a holy flock. As the flock at Jerusalem at her appointed times, so shall the wasted cities be filled with flocks of men, and they shall know that I am Yahuwah. Chapter 37. The hand of Yahuwah was upon me and took me out by the Ruah, or the Spirit of Yahuwah, and put me down in the midst of the valley. And it was filled with bones. So I highlighted filled with bones because you will recognize, for anybody who's a student of prophecy, you're going to recognize the valley of dry bones. How many songs have been written about the valley of dry bones, which is really the coming together of Israel from where they've been scattered. It's the coming together and the bones coming together, the regathering of Israel back into the land, and then the sinews and the skin and the body, and then ultimately the Spirit being breathed into them. And this is the reconstitution of Israel back into the land. So let me go ahead and read it. I'll start again. The hand of Yahuwah was upon me and took me out by the Ruah of Yahuwah and put me down in the midst of the valley, and it was filled with bones. And he made me pass among them all around. And see, there were many, very many on the surface of the valley. And see, they were very dry. And he said to me, Son of man, would these bones live? And I said, Oh, Adonai Yahuwah, you know. Again he said to me, Nabah, or prophesy, to these bones. And you shall say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of Yahuwah. Thus said the Adon Yahuwah to these bones, See, I am bringing into you a spirit, and you shall live. And I shall put sinews on you, and bring flesh upon you, and cover you with skin, and put a spirit in you, and you shall live. And you shall know that I am Yahuwah. And I nabu as I was commanded, and as I nabu there was a noise, and there was a rattling, and the bones came together, bone to bone. And I looked, and saw sinews and flesh come upon them, and skin covered them, but there was no spirit in them. He then said to me, Nabah to the spirit, Nabah, son of man, and you shall say to the spirit, Thus said the Adon Yahuwah, Come from the four winds, O Spirit, and breathe on these slain so that they live. And I nabu as he commanded me, and the Spirit came into them, and they lived, and stood upon their feet, a very great army. So the Spirit came from the four winds, O Spirit, and breathe on them. So these would be the spirits of the people coming to their new bodies, maybe? I'm speculating here, but sure makes sense to me, because here's that more language of coming from the four winds. And when we are raptured, especially when the dead, we're going to see them when the dead are raised, are they immediately pulled into the same body, or are they going to be pulled into these bodies that they've just created, bone to bone? I don't really know. But we get the concept of what's happening. Israel is being gathered back together and being created out of, they had no expectancy. They were just a valley of dry bones. Then skin and sinews were put on them, and now the spirit is being breathed into them, and they are forming the great army of the people of Yahudah as they've been regathered back into the lands. Okay, so verse 11. And he said to me, Son of man, these bones are all... Here you go, I'm going to start this again. Verse 11. And he said to me, Son of man, these bones are all the house of Israel. See, they say, our bones are dry, our expectancy has perished, and we ourselves have been cut off, because this is the current state of Israel. It's dispersed. There's not much. There's no nation of Israel. There's no house of Israel. We're all scattered amongst the people and captives among the people. And the expectancy has perished. I mean, we now have hope because of Yahushua. We have hope that it will be that they have hope, which makes us have hope. But they were in this moment believing they had been cut off. Therefore, in verse 12, therefore, Nabah, and you shall say to them, Thus said the Adon, See, O my people, I am opening your graves, and shall bring you up from your graves, and shall bring you into the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am Yahuwah when I open your graves, O my people, and bring you up from your graves. So hear this. He just says that those bones coming together in the sinew and the skins, and the spirits breathed into them, is the house of Israel, who had been perceiving their bones to be dry and not really feeling very hopeful and expectant and feeling cut off. But he says, See, my people, I am opening your graves. So this is not just the living brought at that time. At this time, when he's gathering his people together, when he's gathering together the house of Israel, he's gathering them from amongst the graves, the dead first, which is Paul's teaching. The dead in Christ shall rise first, and then we who are alive shall be gathered together with them and meet him in the air, meet Yahushua in the air, where we will together forever be with him. And then ultimately he and us are coming back down to this land. All right, so I'm just going to read this again. Verse 12, Therefore, Nabah, and you shall say to them, Thus said the Adon Yahuwah, See, O my people, I am opening your graves, and shall bring you up from your graves, and shall bring you into the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am Yahuwah when I open your graves, O my people, and bring you up from the graves. And I shall put my Ruah in you, and you shall live, and I shall settle you in your own land. So there he's bringing us up from the graves, and he's going to put his spirit in us. We're going to have his spirit to go along with our spirit, and he's going to settle us in our own land, the New Jerusalem, the second time around that's going to be better than the first time. This is the promise to the people of Israel that we have not seen take place yet. I don't know how you can go back in time, see the 1,000-year reign, and see these things taking place yet. So to continue in verse 14, And you shall know that I, Yahuwah, have spoken, and I have done it, declares Yahuwah. And the word of Yahuwah came to me, saying, And you, son of man, take a stick for yourself, and write on it, for Yahudah, and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write on it, for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions. Then bring them together for yourself into one stick, and they shall become one in your hand. So what is this? This is the prophecy of the two sticks. We had the two people groups. We had Yahudah in the south, the southern kingdom, and the people of Israel, his companions. And then we had the people of the northern tribes, which was Ephraim or Joseph, and their kingdom and his companions. At the time that he brings them back into the land, they are going to be brought once again back into one nation. They shall be one nation of the 12 tribes. And we're going to read with David, with Yahushua at their head. So I'm going to read it again. And you, son of man, take a stick for yourself and write on it, for Yahudah or Judah, And for the children of Israel, his companions. And take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, the northern kingdoms. And for all the house of Israel, his companions. And bring them together for yourself into one stick, and they shall become one in your hand. And when the children of your people speak to you, saying, won't you show us what you mean by these? Say to them, thus said the Adon Yahuwah, see, I am taking the stick of Joseph, the northern kingdom, which is in the hand of Ephraim, the northern kingdom, and the tribes of Israel, his companions, and I shall give them unto him with the stick of Yahudah, the southern kingdom, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in my hand, a unified 12 tribes once again. And the sticks on which you write shall be in your hand before their eyes, and speak to them. Thus said the Adon Yahuwah, see, I am taking the children of Israel from amongst the Gentiles, wherever they have gone, and shall gather them from all around, and I shall bring them into their land, and I shall make one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel, and one sovereign shall be sovereign over them all, and let them no longer be two nations, and let them no longer be divided in two reigns. So this has to happen. When he gathers us all back together at the resurrection, at the rapture, this has to happen. He's taking the children of Israel from amongst the Gentile, wherever they've gone, and he's going to make them all one nation. Yahudah and Ephraim or Israel, all one nation in the land. One nation in the land. Just to confirm that, it's one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel, so we are not second guessing where they're going to be brought back into the land. It's the mountains of Israel again, the second time around, the reconstituted with all the rebuilt cities, etc. And there will be one sovereign who shall be sovereign over them all, and we know who that is. And let them no longer be two nations, so we no longer have the northern kingdoms and the southern kingdoms, 10 tribes and 2 tribes, or 9.5 and 2.5. None of that. It's all the 12 or 13 tribes if you include Ephraim and Manasseh. It's all of the tribes united together. Verse 23, and they shall no longer defile themselves with their idols, nor with their filthiness, nor with any of their transgressions, and I shall save them from their dwelling places in which they have sinned, and I shall cleanse them, and they shall be my people, and I shall be their Elohim. The constant theme over and over again throughout all the old scriptures. And this is what's important here, and that is, while David, my servant, is sovereign over him. We know that this is the lineage of David because this is Yahushua. This is the Mosiah. This is the Messiah. This is Jesus. While David, my servant, is sovereign over them. And they shall all have one shepherd and walk in my right rulings and guard my laws and shall do them. So in the days when Yahushua, Jesus, has come back to the land to be sovereign over the unified nations of Israel, the laws, his laws will be guarded, and his right rulings will be guarded, and we will all be doing them. So we will all be learning his ways, the Torah that we spoke of earlier. And so, verse 25, and they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob my servant, Israel. The original acknowledgement of the people of Jacob, Israel. Where your fathers dwelt. So they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob my servant, where your fathers dwelt the first time around. So the second time around, it's going to be the same place where their fathers dwelt. And they shall dwell in it, and they and their children and their children's children forever. And my servant David will be their prince forever. And I shall make a covenant of peace with them, an everlasting covenant it is with them. And I'm suggesting that this is the new covenant promised of. This is the covenant and blood of Yahushua by the servant David, the covenant of peace that begins when they come back into the land, and we have that new covenant, that renewed covenant with them. And I shall place them and increase them, and shall place my mikdash, my home, in their midst forever. And my dwelling place shall be over them. And I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And there we are again. And the Gentiles shall know that I, Yahuwah, am making Israel Kodash, when my mikdash is in, my home is in their midst, or my tabernacle is with my temple, my home, my tabernacle is with them in their midst forever. Now that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and go through 38, especially 38 here, just to make some additional references. And then I'll come back and finalize this. But here in verse 38 it says, the word of Yahweh came to me saying, Son of man, turn your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshach, Tubal, and Nabal against him. Well, here we know, and I'm not going to read it all, but this is where they are called to come down into the lands, to march upon Israel. This would be after the 1,000 years. They're still in peace there. In that 1,000 years, they're in peace. They are living in peace in the land according to the promises. Now, when Gog and Magog, when at the end of that 1,000 years, when the Hasatan, the devil, is released from the pit and goes back out into the world to deceive for a short season and gathers Gog and Magog back together. Well, clearly, by all appearances, peace is taken from the land, at least for a short period of time, but never to be destroyed. There is no, when Gog and Magog comes on the land, according to the war scroll and according to Ezekiel here, there is no succeeding against the land of Israel. Israel will conquer, and at the end of that last battle is the last battle. It's it. That's when death is put away. It's put away, never to rear its ugly face again, because all people will be at that point in time resurrected. Everybody will be changed from the natural flesh that goes away and replaced with spiritual flesh, but some are going to be raised unto resurrection and hope to live with Yahudah. Others are going to be raised unto the lake of fire. So anyway, not the point here. I don't really want to bog down in that. Be ready, prepare yourself and all your assemblies that are assembled around you, and you shall be a guard for them. After many days you shall be called up in the latter years. So we know these are the latter years. You shall come into the land of those brought back from the sword and gathered from many people on the mountains of Israel. So there's no question at this point in time, the people of Israel were already gathered from the many people onto the mountains of Israel, which had been at one time a continual waste, but they aren't now. But they were brought out of the Gentiles, and all of them shall dwell safely. So Gog is coming into the land of people who had been brought back and gathered from many peoples onto the mountains of Israel, which had been a continual waste, but the place to which they were brought out of the Gentiles, and to which all of them now dwell safely. And you, Gog, shall go up, coming like a storm, covering like a cloud, and many peoples with you. You shall devise an evil plan. Let me go up against a land of unwalled villages. This is what I was talking about. So throughout the land of the New Jerusalem, the mountains of Israel, will also be unwalled villages to go along with the walled cities. Just a point of reference. Let me go to those at rest who dwell safely, all of them without walls, having neither bars nor plunder, to take plunder. And this is what I was trying to say earlier. This is Gog trying to come down at the behest of Satan, trying to come down as though they could and plunder and take booty from the kingdom of YHWH. Well, if the war scrolls are correct, then this war takes, what was it, 30 years? It takes 20, 30, 40 years, something like that, for this one to play out. We'll have to see how it really plays out, because I don't know that we have tons and tons of details on there. But when you read the war scrolls, you'll know, just like you haven't seen any of this happen yet. We haven't seen in history, unless they've hidden it from us, we've not seen anything like what has been described here, which is the regathering of Israel into a unified nation under our sovereign, which is Mashiach, Jesus, our King. We haven't seen it, just like we haven't seen what has taken place in the war scrolls. Nothing could have. You can't see. Nothing in the history of Israel could represent what we saw in the war scrolls. No, it just can't. You would have to see, because what is described in there can only come about. You can easily see it happening after 1,000 years, when the unified nation of Israel has put back together their priests and their temples and their things that they were operating in. And then when they're adorned in the way that is described in the war scrolls, it makes sense at the end of this 1,000-year period. All right, so this is all about Gog and Magog coming down to take from the people. Just another highlighted 16, and you shall come up against my people Israel like a cloud. So this is my regathered people of Israel in the latter days that God comes up against Israel in their hordes, just like Revelation tells us. In order that the Gentiles shall know me when I am Kodash in you, O Gog, before your eyes, as O Gog is judged. As the final, I think that is the final gasp of the Gentile nations of Satan through Gog and the lands of Magog. It's the last gasp before this entire period is over, that this 7 days of time. And we begin the 8th day, as we read in some of the other writings. A new day begins for us, where we will be living. It'll be just another day. It'll be another, we're going to enter into a new time that we do not have lots of details on, to my knowledge. You know, it was in the homilies of Clement that I was reading about the 8th day again. Okay. All right, and it shall be on the day when God comes against the land of Israel, declares the dawn, that my wrath shall come up against my face. All right, let me see if there's anything else I want to clarify here. Not really. To go into more details of what happens to Gog, I highlighted verse 8 of chapter 39, where it says, "And see, it shall come, and it shall be done, declares the Adon Yahuwah. This is the day of which I have spoken, the day of wrath, the day of Yahweh." Now, I have become a little uncertain as to what the day of Yahweh is. The day of Yahweh for me has been that day of tribulation, or that day of wrath that he pours out towards the end of that 7-year period upon the Gentiles. That would be the day of Yahweh. But I had heard others speak of the entire 1,000-year period of time, which would include that day of retribution right at the beginning as the day of Yahweh, and I suppose I can embrace that as well as a potential. But also it could be that in this moment, when in verse 8 we're talking about, "See, it shall come, and it shall be done. This is the day of which I have spoken." This great war that ends the war, and when death is swallowed up in victory, is at the end of the that 7th year, the 1,000-year millennial reign. And so is that the day of which I've spoken? I don't really know yet. I'm still trying to investigate it and find the things that tie it all together for me. All right. Okay. I'm going to let it go there. That's enough. The real point in this is I really don't think it's possible unless they have successfully literally hid 1,000 years where what would have been experienced during that 1,000 years was a period of time when the southern tribes had been gathered back together, the northern tribes had been gathered back together as one, under the sovereign of Yahushua, to operate as a unified reign of the Shemayim, reign of Elohim on earth. This is the time that we've all been looking for. I just don't see how it could possibly have happened. So in these discussions, while I think I can still embrace, and I'm still looking to see if that AD 70 is the final scattering of the unbelieving house of Israel that scattered them to the four winds, and if that is the tribulation spoken of by Yahushua versus an end time tribulation, of the Antichrist. I mean, I still think, from what I'm gathering, there must be a gathering of the Antichrist and the beast kingdoms together against the world and against the church, against us. I think that must still happen, but it's not Gog and Magog. And I don't think that what happened in AD 70 would qualify for that either. I think we must be talking about another separate item. Okay, but in summary, I really don't think I can embrace as it stands the idea that the 1,000-year millennium has occurred, because there's nothing in history that would represent anything that we have seen that I just read to you and shared with you throughout Ezekiel. So it doesn't seem apparent. I'll keep looking. We'll see. Thank you. I'll close it here, and may you be Baruch.